Welcome back, everyone, to today's explainer for our college public speaking class. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here. Let's just be honest for a second, okay? Stepping up to a podium can be a completely nerve-wracking experience. The sweaty palms, the racing heart, we've all been there, right? But today, we're going to embark on a really fascinating journey that I promise will change how you approach that podium forever. We're going to start way up high, looking at some foundational, high-level communication theory, and then we'll bring it right back down to earth with incredibly practical, actionable advice that you can use in your very next presentation. Whether you're a seasoned speaker or just completely terrified of an audience, understanding the actual mechanics of how we use language is a real game changer. So, let's dive right in. Here's our quick roadmap for today. We're going from the physical right into the philosophical. We'll kick things off with owning the physical space. Then we'll hit the science of signs, followed by the limits of language. After that, we're unpacking denotation versus connotation, and we'll wrap up the whole shebang with some really concrete guidelines on using language effectively.
All right, part 1, owning the physical space. Now, it might seem kind of counterintuitive to start an explainer on language by talking about standing completely still, but mastering communication actually begins before you utter a single syllable. Your physical presence is literally the very first message you send to your audience. When you walk to the front of that room, there's a simple yet admittedly terrifying sequence you've got to follow. First, plant your feet firmly. No nervous shuffling, no pacing. Anchor yourself. Second, stand perfectly still for 3 whole seconds. And I promise you, when the adrenaline is spiking, 3 seconds feels like an absolute eternity. Your brain will be screaming at you to just start talking, but resist it. Because while it feels like forever to you, to the audience, it looks like pure, unadulterated command. Third, use those 3 seconds to make deliberate eye contact with at least 3 different people. Connect with them as individuals. And finally, deliver your first line slowly, loudly, and with unwavering confidence. The key takeaway here: stillness equals authority. Master that silence and you own the room before you even use language.
Okay, with our feet firmly planted, let's build the theoretical foundation for our words in Section 2, the science of signs. To truly get language, we need to put on our professor hats for just a minute and look at a field called semiotics. Semiotics is basically the study of everything that can be used for communication. Think of it as the secret weapon to understanding how we bridge the gap between isolated human brains. I mean, we're all essentially trapped in our own heads, right? Semiotics explains how we actually manage to transmit an idea from my brain into yours. In this world, words aren't just letters on a page. They are essentially signs. They're the smallest fundamental units of meaning we have.
Let's slow down and break down the anatomy of a sign. According to semiotics, every sign is made up of 2 totally inseparable parts. It's like 2 sides of a single coin. You absolutely cannot have one without the other. On one side, you have the signifier. This is the physical form, the actual, tangible sound waves hitting your eardrum right now or the ink printed on a piece of paper. On the other side is the signified. This is the mental concept, the abstract idea that the physical signifier unlocks inside your mind.
Let's apply this to something super familiar. Think about the letters T-R-E-E, or the sound, tree, I'm making with my vocal cords. That's the signifier. By itself, it's literally just vibrating air. But the magic of language happens instantly. The second you hear that sound, your brain effortlessly conjures up the signified. You immediately get this mental picture of a leafy, green plant with a wooden trunk. It is absolutely amazing how quickly and seamlessly that physical signifier triggers an abstract thought in our minds.
But here's where the theory gets pretty mind-blowing. The relationship between the signifier, the sound, and the signified, the object itself, is completely 100% arbitrary. There's no biological or logical reason why the sound tree should mean a leafy green plant. We just all culturally agreed that it does. A word's meaning comes entirely from its conventional difference from other words. This arbitrary rule hits the nail on the head as to why learning a foreign language is so incredibly tough. You are literally rewiring your brain to attach entirely new, arbitrary signifiers like RBA or ARBL to mental concepts you already know.
So, moving on to Section 3, the limits of language. Let's see what language can and, crucially, cannot do.
Language is arguably the thing that puts human beings at the very top of the food chain. It's our ultimate survival tool. It lets us discuss wild abstractions, things like freedom, or justice, or love. It even lets us conquer time, allowing us to plan for a future that hasn't happened, or learn from a past we weren't even alive for. But, and this is a massive constraint for us as speakers, it also creates boundaries. Because we rely on language for conscious thought, it actually prevents us from thinking about things we simply don't have the words to describe. If your vocabulary is limited, your ability to conceptualize the complexities of the world is literally limited too. The stakes here are high, folks, because when you speak, you are providing the tools for your audience to think.
But hey, language also has a wonderfully fun loophole. Because semiotics brackets off real-world objects, language doesn't actually need a physical referent to work. There's this great t-shirt joke. A friend told me I was delusional. I almost fell off my unicorn. This highlights something so cool. We can use signs to talk about totally imagined things. We can use signifiers for unicorns or mermaids, and your brain perfectly generates the signified concept, even though they don't exist in the real world. Language literally lets us construct entirely new realities from scratch.
Which brings us to a really critical distinction for any public speaker. Section 4, denotation versus connotation. Think of this as the literal versus the emotional baggage of language. The denotative meaning is the strict, objective, dictionary definition of a word. The connotative meaning, though, is the subjective meaning suggested by the associations or emotions that word triggers. And as speakers, we've got to remember, words rarely travel light. We are never just handing our audience a dry dictionary definition. We're handing them a heavy suitcase completely packed with history, culture, and personal feelings.
So I want you to mentally answer this question right now. Really think about it. What is the difference between a house and a home? Denotatively, strictly by the book, they describe the exact same physical structure, right? A building where people live. But connotatively, oh, they are worlds apart. A house feels like wood, bricks, drywall, a mortgage. But a home? That triggers deep, deep emotions of warmth, family, safety, and belonging. As a speaker, choosing the word home instead of house completely changes the emotional resonance of your entire presentation. Let's look at a few powerful examples. Take the American flag. Denotatively, objectively speaking, it's simply a rectangular piece of fabric with horizontal red and white stripes and a blue rectangle with white stars. That's its literal definition. But connotatively, the meanings are massive, and they vary wildly. Depending entirely on someone's background, political views, or nationality, this object might trigger profound feelings of patriotism and sacrifice, or it could trigger completely different, highly charged historical associations. You have to note that the signs you use will always be interpreted through the specific emotional lens of your audience. Same thing with the phrase Wall Street. Denotatively, it's just a specific geographic intersection in Lower Manhattan. It just tells you where you are on a map. But connotatively, that phrase carries incredibly heavy associations. To some, it's the absolute pinnacle of global finance, capitalism, and personal success. To others, it carries strong connotations of corporate greed or systemic economic inequality. The signifier is merely a street corner. The signified is an entire economic worldview. Finally, consider a simple wooden cross. Denotatively, it's just two pieces of wood intersecting at right angles. That is all it physically is. But connotatively, it's one of the most recognizable signs in human history. Depending on cultural or religious background, this simple geometric shape carries profound, unfathomable layers of meaning, emotion, history, and theology. Now, the takeaway here isn't to take a side on any of these symbols. The takeaway is to realize that you cannot control the denotation, but you absolutely must be keenly aware of the connotation if you want to connect with your crowd.
Okay, so how do we actually use all this high-level theory? Let's bring it back to the surface for a practical payoff in Section 5, using language effectively in your upcoming speech assignments.
Mastering connotations allows you to use vivid imagery. Your ultimate goal as a speaker is to use words to paint detailed, vibrant mental pictures of objects, actions, and ideas directly inside the minds of your audience. You aren't just up there transmitting dry data from a podium. You're carefully selecting the right signifiers to create a living, breathing experience right inside their heads.
To synthesize everything we've covered today, here are 4 crisp, actionable guidelines for your very next speech. First, use language accurately. Make sure your signifiers actually match the signified concepts you mean to convey. Second, use language clearly. Don't hide behind confusing jargon. Clarity is a kindness to your listener. Third, use language vividly. Lean into those rich connotative meanings we discussed to paint pictures and stir genuine emotions. And fourth, use language appropriately. Always, always tailor your words to the specific audience in the room and the occasion you're speaking at.
And that brings us to the end of our lecture. We've gone from the physical act of planting your feet in silence, navigated the deep theory of signifiers, and arrived at the emotional power of connotation. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Now that you know, words are not just sounds,
but incredibly powerful signs that trigger entire worlds of meaning? How will you use signs in your next presentation to truly own the room? Think about it, plan your words carefully, and I really look forward to hearing your speeches. Thanks so much for joining this explainer.